Today, we are going to have a conversation with some of the folks from ABC Supply about what contractors need to know about where the market is actually moving. So it turns out when you have over 1,000 branches, you have some insight into what's happening across the landscape of the built environment. The fellows that are joining us, Rob and Eric, are leaders across the United States. They reach virtually across the country and share how the renewable sector is growing within ABC. So Rob Smith and Eric Cieslak are joining me here on stage. Welcome to SunCast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. This is great.
I want to start with the sort of setting the stage. A lot has happened in the solar market. As a distributor, you see a lot of different vectors that come through that give you a pulse on how the market, sort of what's the temperature, what's changed. So how would you characterize the last 24 months? What's changed that most contractors haven't adjusted to yet?
You know, a lot of people are still in denial about the OBBB, that it's actually a real thing, and that the tax credits are officially gone at this point for cash deals. Obviously still around for the TPO markets, but kind of reinventing yourselves as a contractor, post ITC world.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you have to kind of have a redesign of what your style and your approach is to the market. You got to start working with finance companies, looking at lease programs, and just kind of being creative in how you're going to approach the market and get new customers and business.
Part of the job of a distributor, I often would characterize it as sort of for serving two functions, logistics and finance, right? A lot of folks think, oh, well, I go to my distributor because I need parts, but oftentimes you can buy parts anywhere, but can you get financing and can they take it where you need it at the time on the time that you need it? You serve a critical role in helping a contractor drive efficiency in their operations and therefore optimize margin. So where are contractors losing margin right now without realizing it?
I think one of the things that most contractors, being a contractor back in the day, was the labor force, being efficient in what you're doing on your job site and what are you doing with your time. So time management, if you're doing everything proper and you're doing time management properly, you're actually saving money. So execution of getting material to the roof, how are you loading it? OSHA's compliance, are you doing it safely? Are you getting through points of contact? All these things we can mitigate and save time and money for contractors.
I think also, with our capability of being able to roof loads, having contractors actually go into a distribution partner, tying up your crews, 1, 2, 3, 4 different type of people that are there waiting to pick up material. I mean, that's an hour wasted every single day. And if you're doing a project a day, that's 5 hours per person. I mean, you could literally squeeze out another project a week if, you use some of these capabilities that ABC has.
So if we zoom into just the last 6 months, I'm curious, you mentioned OBB, Sunset. I heard an episode, our friend Sean White, just a couple of days ago, where he's basically, going into what incentives are there that are available now that the residential market doesn't really have incentives. Where are contractors operating sort of in a pre-OBBB mode and need to shift their narrative?
I think historically, a lot of the contractors have used the exact same product mix. That was great for about 10 to 15 years. But, past or post ITC now, contractors are really starting to take a look at their bottom line, their overheads, what the true costs of what products are,
right?
What that ROI looks like. The traditional products that they were installing for the past 10 to 15 years are no longer those top tier products anymore. Look around. There's literally hundreds of other manufacturers out there. They just don't get the same recognition. But as we start diving into some of these products and offer up solutions to the contractor, they start to realize, why hasn't anyone brought us this before?
Well, we know why. Because they're getting financing from one of two sources, and their AVL has 3 vendors on it.
Yeah.
How do you, as a distributor, actually reconcile the unnatural constraint of the AVLs, where it's sort of a double-edged sword? Like, we need to finance these systems, and how is that evolving in a post-OBB world?
Well, I think with the financings now, with a lot of private equity coming in, they're opening up the AVLs and giving you a wide array of options.
That's encouraging.
One of the things that I've noticed more and more is the homeowners don't really have a choice of what is being installed. That was kind of the pre-solar. Now you can actually sit down and talk to a homeowner and say, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And can I fulfill it? Now with the private equity finance groups out there, this is allowing that avenue to open up and not be so exclusive to a certain group of products.
Yeah.
And I think the original goal of why everyone kind of got into the industry was to put more solar on the roof.
Yeah.
A lot of people have forgotten that mission, and it's greed has been driving it probably for the past decade now.
Yeah.
So why not open up the AVLs and put more solar on the roof across the country?
I mean, it used to be sort of this cash versus lease conundrum. How is it being financed? Is financing shaping the market more than manufacturer innovation? You guys get a chance to see a lot of the innovation coming through the pipeline. How do you view the current environment of the cash versus lease products and how that influences decisions?
I think a lot of it is very state by state, and the policy is really driving everything. Being from the East Coast myself, I mean, Florida is a prime example. It is 99.9% TPO markets. But then you go a little bit north, Georgia, in North Carolina, they're almost 99% cash markets.
Right.
So a lot of it just happens to be the policy that's in place in each state.
What do you think manufacturers misunderstand about how contractors really do business or how contractors behave? Is there a dissonance between the way contractors think, market, create products versus how you see contractors operating?
I think every contractor is a little bit different. As we see a lot of these larger nationwide contractors going out of business, or if they are not going out of business, they're actually changing their model. Instead of a national approach, they're starting to subcontract out to those local installers. So we're starting to see more of a regional approach.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the manufacturers, they're still chasing that big fish or that big whale.
Right.
And they really don't exist without those regional players working for them.
A lot of the manufacturers look at everything as a volume key. They're hyper-focused on mass volume, running through EPCs and large groups or installation. It's still common today, but I believe that a lot of the companies are getting a little smaller, a little tighter. They're doing inside sales within the company. They have their own installation groups within the company. And then the manufacturers are starting to appeal to that type of group and how to actually be the experts into that specific product to the customer. So things are changing a little bit from back in the old days where it was just mass production, mass installation.
Yeah.
And then the quality of work, I believe, is starting to improve and go up.
And also some of those manufacturers were also selling direct to these contractors, these large-scale contractors. And I think with them being diversified now, they're realizing the value of distribution.
There are a lot of manufacturers, think of one particularly like Cieslak, who have a very specific philosophy on where distribution sits in the value chain.
Yeah.
And the amount of volume required to go direct, so to speak, keeps going up, right? Which only increases the value of distribution. What's interesting though is you mentioned the variety. There's more variety than ever, it seems. Geez, Motorola is sitting here next to us today.
Right.
Who had that on their bingo card when you came to Intersolar? How do you as a distributor think about product selection? Where might contractors misunderstand the way you guys sort of like the thumb on the scale you have around what gets put in the warehouse and what gets designed into their BOM or whatever?
Well, I think that kind of ties in with Rob is saying, because you got two types of markets. You got the leasing TPO market, and then you got the cash market.
Yeah.
So being the cash market is a little bit open on what is required for AVL because it's cash.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you follow the OBBB, it states it has to have fiat compliance.
Yeah.
And if you're part of the leasing option, then you have to have fiat compliance with domestic content attached to it. So it depends on where the market is, and that then dictates what direction you can, what products.
How hard is it to get fiat compliant product right now?
It depends on who you're talking to. I mean, a lot of people can say that they're fiat compliant and can, write that on their own company letterheads, but it's another thing to get a third-party audited leaded that is fiat compliant. And that's where we're starting to see a lot of issues with certain manufacturers, asking certain ones, can I see your product being made in your factory?
Yeah.
Not a lot of them are willing to share that information.
What sort of
or let you do a
validation
factory
is
tour.
there of fiat compliance? Is there any standardization yet?
I mean, the guidance just came out last week, and that guidance was very specific on a kind of a 3-system requirement. So basically ownership that has no fiat tied to it. And
can't be more than 10%, right?
Yeah, it's actually 25%, I believe, is where that threshold is. And then anything above has to be American. Also, your product procurement, where you're getting all your product down to the minerals. They haven't passed
the minerals.
Haven't passed that yet, which is a 232.
Thank goodness.
So yeah, thank goodness. And that because of that 232 is not going further back in the daisy chain.
Yeah. Well, I guess the question that I would be more prone to ask is, are you seeing a big uplift in demand for, i.e. customers asking for domestic product and fiat-free product? How's that driving the decisions that you all have to make or the hair you have to pull out?
Again, that's not actually, the customers are not requesting it as much because it's actually technically dictated by the leasing companies. Because the leasing companies are still going to get the tax subsidies, but then the customer themselves will not.
So it sounds like what's driving your purchasing or procurement decisions is more around the partnerships you have with leasing companies.
Correct. Yes.
And their current AVLs. But, you go over to the cash markets, most of those contractors, they don't care about domestic content. They just want to get that lowest price per watt with various products to be able to help replace that ITC that they lost.
What, as a percentage, would you say are cash deals in your portfolio, do you think?
Probably 20%.
20?
80% financing,
so the
20%
80-20
cash.
is finance. That makes sense.
I mean, also it's state driven. So, I mean, what could be, like you said, in Florida, which is mostly 99% lease. In California, it's relatively the same thing. You're looking at a 95% mainly lease.
Wow. One of the things that ABC Supply prides itself on is being able to translate how to do business in a vertical across many different verticals. The largest supplier for exterior and interior. I've talked to James enough to know the exact talking point.
Yep.
As a distributor, the largest supplier in the nation. So you have to spend a lot of time not only educating your team internally, but educating the contractors on how to interact with distribution, what to expect from you, how to trust you, when to engage, when to be able to expect product to arrive, et cetera. Can you talk about some of the areas where you routinely find yourself sort of educating, correcting contractors on what to expect from distribution and how to work effectively?
I would say, they've been really used to the model of same-day pickup.
Oh, yeah?
But at the end of the day, why do you need same-day pickup? If you're an efficient company and actually planning jobs out, as soon as you submit it for that permit, that's when you should be reaching out to your distributor to ensure that you have the product that you need when you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's about planning and proper planning. I mean, basically, as a contractor used to buy from ABC Supply, I vividly remembered, the way you line up, the way you do your schedule, how you schedule your crews. I understand how permitting works in the process, and jobs can become available, the pressure from the homeowner. But if you really work with a true distributor is going to know the ins and outs and how to better improve your business and plan properly with you. And I think that's where we differentiate from the most distributors.
I think that differentiates us a lot from a lot of the, the incumbents in the industry, other distributors is, we don't want to just sell product. Yeah. We don't want you just to be a customer. We want to actually be a true partner. We want to grow your business and take you to the next level.
But I just want to show up and submit my order to the desk and drive away with modules.
Yeah. Less transactional.
So it needs to be less transactional. So what it sounds like is there needs to be a depth of relationship. I know a lot of folks see distribution as a means to an end, and we'll have credit terms with you guys, with CED, with whoever, right? You name your distributor. And as soon as essentially it works like this, tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to buy until I run out of credit with ABC. And then I'm going to go over here and buy from my second tier supplier. And then I'll go to my third tier supplier. And then when I've paid down enough that I can buy back from ABC, I'm going to return back to my favorite supplier, right?
You've unlocked the mystery of the big national installers right
there. But you don't see that happening at a local level as well. I mean, everyone has a CED and an ABC in their in the major metropolitan areas.
We don't see it as much from the smaller, and I don't even want to call them mom and pop anymore. Yeah. It's kind of a taboo term, but I would say small to mid-sized contractors seem to be a little bit more efficient and savvy with their cash flow.
Yeah.
In certain markets.
So if you're managing your cash flow well, you don't need to hop around to different distributors. That's what I hear you saying. But what if you're growing fast and you need...
I mean, at that point, if you're growing that fast, your books should show that you're growing that fast.
I opened up saying that distribution is for logistics and finance, right? If I'm leaning heavy on distribution for finance and I run out of headroom, what you're saying is that I have a cash collection problem.
If everything is kosher and you are growing and you are selling that much,
Yeah.
and you're running a legitimate business,
Yeah.
your books should be able to show that. Which in turn, once you submit those books for a credit line increase,
There you go.
it should be no problem to increase that credit.
And if you're a faithful buyer, then we're happily going to increase your credit line.
It should reflect in your growth.
Yep.
Fantastic. Now I know what you mean by are your books clean? Because
Yeah.
the only limitation to credit line is can you defensively tell me that you're going to pay down the credit line?
Yeah.
Do you have
Exactly.
cash coming in? All right. You mentioned that a lot of the major national players have either broken up or disappeared altogether. I'll point to ADT Solar as a great example. Where are we seeing consolidation? What do you see in the sort of shakeup of the national installer model happening at the contractor level? And we'll focus on residential solar for the moment.
I do notice that I see a lot of them starting to go away from the fact of storing and buying and procuring product as a distributor for themselves internally.
Yeah.
And so that hence that's because if you got the 30% tax credit and the ITC credit's gone, you got a 30% cost stack you have to remove.
Yeah.
So you start to just evaluate your business and seeing where you can actually fine tune your business and pull
Right.
things out to save that money.
It's a large holding cost.
It's a margin that you have to hold. So, I mean, with ABC Supply, we're very specific in what we do. We're logistics and we're distributed with credit terms. That we stay in our lane and that's what we do. And if you look at it, the entire world in the United States and outside of the United States, distribution's in everything. Everything that's successful goes through a liquor distributor. Food goes to a food distributor. Nothing done on a big scale is done for one entity does everything.
Right.
And I think that the larger companies are starting to see that. And now they're making the proper moves in order to stay viable. We want everyone to be successful and keep everyone in business, but we want to take the strategy and be smarter in how we work together.
Where have you seen the size of contractor begin to increase? Can you talk about that? Because it to your point, it used to be that if you're a big installer, let's call it super regional or bigger, you just go direct. Have you seen size of orders and volume throughput increase in the last 6 to 10 months?
I don't believe so. I think it's gotten more stable and minimized because, like I said, they downsize their warehouse capacities and buying direct, especially with everything that's going on in 2025 and the bottleneck of the industry. A lot of the people are starting to say, okay, I don't want to overextend myself. Let's work with a distributor that can take on the higher burden of cost and purchases and warehousing it, and they could distribute across the United States and work with us. I've seen that kind of shrink down a little bit, and their approach is more strategic and direct.
And we're not seeing as much on the residential as we are on the commercial side, for example. The residential side, the big installers, they're saving 2 to 3 cents on a module. Well, let's factor in logistics. Let's factor in warehousing, the labor that it takes to do all that, to load them up in the trucks, get them to the job sites. You're now actually paying more than if you were just to go through distribution. So a lot of these guys are starting to understand that business model and trying to do some cost savings there. There is a point where a contractor is large enough, and that's why I bring up the commercial side, because private equity gets involved. Once you have private equity in there, I get it. You don't really need distribution because you have that cash flow. You don't need the credit terms and everything else that distribution is able to offer. So what that size actually looks like, is that 1 megawatt? Is that 50 megawatts? It just depends.
Okay. So another aspect that I find fascinating about ABC Supply, apart from the fact that, did I mention you have 1,000 retail locations? Last check, their next closest competitor in the space has a little under 150.
Yeah.
Is the fact that you all were originally founded as a roofing distributor.
Correct.
Now, my original hypothesis is if I'm a solar installer, I'm not going to buy from the roofing guys. They're the competition. Why is that wrong?
I think the markets are actually merging together. I think that we're starting to see more solar contractors being involved in roofing. It's kind of like the general contractor viewpoint. When I started off in roofing, when we looked at it is, okay, if the roofing industry is going to hit a low, what are we doing to offset it so the highs and lows are not so prominent?
Right.
And so what we started to do is diversify our business. I think I'm starting to see that more often with solar contractors getting involved into the roofing trade, and vice versa. The roofings are getting into the solar trade. And then they're diversifying, getting into windows and doors and siding. Now you're hitting all the verticals at ABC
Now you need a
Supply.
real building supplier.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? not just the wires.
Yes.
And talking about who's actually qualified. So about 2 years ago at the NAPSEP conference in Raleigh, it was during Brian Mayfield's code cycle. And
Yay, Mayfield.
it was a great conversation. Somebody brought up the point about roofers getting into solar and how they're not qualified personnel to be up on that roof.
Oh, how
and so I
interesting.
posed the question, it was just like, well, how many people in this room are actually certified by any of the shingle manufacturers? Crickets, not a single person. So it's merging whether we realize it or not. So, the big push in education that ABC is starting to do right now is actually tie in some of these solar contractors with the roofers.
Yeah.
Or if they do want to start another vertical, actually get them set up with some of these shingle or like metal roof manufacturers to understand that product line.
Do you do any of the matchmatching? Do people call you and they're like, hey, I'm a roofer and I need a solar guy? Every week.
Every week.
So it's a lead gen as well. You guys are
Correct.
origination.
Yep.
What's not to love?
Right.
What's the most common mistake you see contractors making in storage specifically? It seems like storage for the last, 3 years is the tail wagging the dog, and finally, storage is the big dog in the kennel right now.
Man, I remember when it used to be the SPR and you walk under the show in Las Vegas or Long Beach, or I think it was Anaheim, and it's all panel manufacturers.
Yeah.
Now it's all storage.
One of EcoFlow right at the front here, like the biggest booth.
Yeah. I mean,
Besides you guys.
Batteries have been huge. I mean, it's policy pushed. It's pushed by the energy, the companies like SCG&E, Edison, PG&E, that PP or the PPAs. Basically, it's gotten to a point, especially in California, with how much our time of use rate has increased.
Yeah.
We're hyper focused now. In order to do a solar system, you have to do a battery backup. And I think what's happening here in California is trickling across. But the thing is, what you need to focus on now is: are you getting a good battery? Is it following the rules and guidance that we need to have?
Yep.
And are you getting the proper calculation done?
Yep.
So now storage is becoming this huge prominent part of the business. I think it's going to be a massive part of the business in the future.
I think one of the biggest mistakes is just buying just based on brand.
I'll take any battery you got as long as it's Tesla.
Yeah, right. I mean, just because of brand recognition, not to throw anybody under the bus, but it kind of goes back to the financing AVLs. There's only a specific number of inverters and batteries that are available.
Totally.
But again, look around. There are a lot of other manufacturers that have shorter ROIs, more cycles during their lifespan as well.
Any that you'd care to name?
Check out our website.
I know you don't want to call
Check
anyone
out our
out.
website.
I've been super impressed by some of the folks that are not on your traditional AVLs, and I think that the installers I talk to are trying to push customers to go cash deals so they can get off AVL because they want to sell them
100%.
qualifiably better product without knocking the product that's on the AVLs. And AVL, if folks are not familiar, is the approved vendor list. I'm sorry, we keep using that terminology without telling you what it is. But yeah, it's really interesting. I remember when we started introducing AVLs, when I was at Trina, we had to all of a sudden this thing we got to get on the AVL for Sonova.
Right.
And it was like, what the hell is an AVL? And why do I have to do that? I've got all these customers calling up asking for our product. Well, now they can't get it financed unless we actually have it on the AVL. It really distorted the market perception of what is both good and bankable.
Yep.
And for better or worse, it was just simply a standardization through similar means of private equity of getting better pricing on product. Like the AVL was a way for, in my view, I think you share this vision, Rob, that the AVL was a way for private equity and rolling up these derivatives essentially to get the lowest cost product available, which was still considered bankable by Wall Street, right? Which necessarily constrained the Venn diagram. But we've got products. I mean, you can see from my vantage point more than 4 that are not on most AVLs, and they are qualifiably the best products to buy. So how do we get, I don't know that you have the answer for this, but what do you see as the evolution here? Are the financing solutions coming around to what we used to consider like second tier suppliers?
I think right now what everyone's looking at is, where's the bottleneck constraints? What product's available? I think that's going to be one of the biggest things to discuss is what is available and what can you procure? What I can place an order today and receive by the end of this week?
Yeah.
What can what can I receive? What has not been safe harbor? What has not been reserved? Because if we remember correctly, that reserved product is reserved for a specific company.
Yep.
You will not be able to touch it if you're not that main source or that company that put a deposit to safe harbor it. So they have that 5%.
Are you guys safe harboring product for customers? Is that something that ABC Supply does?
We actually technically secure product for any type of customer who needs business.
But I mean, is there stuff in your warehouse that is like earmarked as a safe harbor batch?
No.
No.
Because then you're not a distributor.
We're going way off script here, guys. I just hope you know I'm making them squirm.
Yeah. I mean, last year, that's why you saw a huge influx of purchasing through distribution was everyone safe harboring. But the guidelines were so vague that it's a lot of risk. And if you're wrong, you're not just wrong, you're really wrong. And you're stuck holding the bag with all this expensive product and you can't move it at all. So we opted for the safe route and just kind of stay the course and keep pushing those name brands. I think you hit the nail on the head with the evolution comments.
Yeah.
I've been in the industry 17 years, and I remember when SMA and Fronius were the top two inverter manufacturers. Why are they not on all these AVLs?
Right.
To me, they are the most bankable companies on the market. You look at some of these other inverter manufacturers, they've been around 15 years. I don't really consider them bankable. But at the end of the day, we were talking to a couple of finance guys who said that they were bankable.
Yeah.
That's what we can't really figure out.
Do you know what's wild to me? Like Fronius, just to pull on that thread, Fronius has, they dominate an entire separate sector of the arc welding market, dominate it. They have a technology that is more like core to an industry than anybody could imagine.
Right.
They still to this day are the only inverter manufacturer that sends over-the-air updates that can completely change the architecture of the inverter and what it's capable of doing. And they're Austrian, so it's not as though there's like a quality question. You're right. It really is baffling in terms of what shows up on the AVL and what doesn't. But I imagine that you have this conversation all the time. And one of the reasons I'm pulling on it is because you get contractors calling you all the time. And they're like, hey, I want to buy Fronius. And you're like, yep, sorry. You're the first person in 2 weeks to ask for it.
Right.
And we need it. So as a distributor, you rely on that pull through as well. You need, you have these buying signals that tell you, well, we can finally stock this because we have enough interest in it.
Yeah, I think that's where we're leaning very heavily on kind of these new financing partners that are up and coming that are tired of these giant AVLs that pigeonhole contractors into a certain product mix. With some of these large national finance guys having the same AVL and everyone chasing the exact same AVLs, you're going to run out of products. No matter how much these manufacturers plan, it's a bottleneck. It's a capacity of how much can you truly actually make. Yeah, it's not just providing it, but truly manufacture it and get it out to the masses. And that's the bottleneck that, we're kind of on the front lines in between manufacturing and the contractor. So we're starting to see that bottleneck already starting to happen. And a lot of these finance companies, they're not going to give away their tranches. They're going to have to make it work. So they're going to start catering to the high volume contractors, and some of the smaller and mid-sized contractors are unfortunately going to get left behind.
And here's something to think about as a contractor. If you're all selling the same product, then you're really losing the ability of quality. What you're doing is you're racing on pricing.
Yeah. Yes. It's a race to the bottom.
If I sold the same roofing materials as everyone else, then all that meant was who's the cheapest. Because you're really, the install is the install. That is, you follow the book, you follow the manual, do exactly what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're just now bartering on price. You're really just eroding margin.
We could go so many directions here because I have my friend Robbie Mickelson and I are like on team $2 a watt, and there's a whole lot of reasons why homeowners are overpaying for solar. One of which is the sales tactics and door-to-door tactics that increase scarcity, essentially convince homeowners that if they don't buy right now from this vendor, that they're never going to see this deal again. And so they don't price shop, despite the fact that they absolutely would if they were looking for a vehicle or anything else worth $40,000 to $80,000. And it's easier today than ever to price shop. I'm curious what other macroeconomic inputs or forces you see. You've been in the industry, Rob, for 17 years, as long as I have. Things like utility rates or infrastructure hurdles that are impacting the day-to-day for your contractors.
I think with what's going on with time of use and now the energy companies working on the PPA programs and having battery cycling, and
Right.
they're incorporating that and having control over with the smart meter, having control over your systems in your house, and then cycling your energy and reusing your energy and giving it back to you at the high peak rate. It's the getting contractors and homeowners kind of like, what's next? What do we need to do? So I think it's very smart in how you set up your system, and be very careful. Read the fine print of what you sign when you start working with your local energy companies. You got to be able to know, what am I getting out of this, and what's my ROI, and is this going to benefit me in the long run? I think there's a lot of things that need to be dug into and read on another level with the contractor and the homeowner, and making those relationships not just a transactional, but actually make a business strategy. And then the homeowner will respect the decision you make and what products you use.
You mentioned business strategy. Rob, I was in your Beloit facilities last summer.
Mm-hmm.
I conveniently was in Chicago, and of course, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to Beloit from Chicago. And I was impressed by the entire education facility you have, with storage and VPPs becoming such a prevalent component. How do you all think about, I mentioned your education facility because you have a very concerted effort to train contractors on more than just application, more than just how to seal this boot around a stanchion. You think about business strategy and how to help them think more along the lines of like, well, how can I actually have a tangential business that's accretive? Can you talk a bit about the education process at ABC and how it differentiates the product that is the distributor itself?
Are we talking from the solar side or a roofing side?
Go for it.
So on the solar side, one of the missing pieces I've seen in the industry over this past, almost 2 decades now is, webinars only go but so far.
Yeah.
Contractors, at the end of the day, it's a construction trade. Whether, the finance, solar, the fintech guys want to realize it or not, we are a construction business.
Yep.
So with any type of construction business, the best way to learn is hands-on experience. So, having manufacturers come in, let's just talk about racking, for example, having some sort of demo roof that's there, handing the drill to the contractor, and then walk them step by step on how to take a system completely apart and then put it back together again. That is going to be more valuable than 50 to 100 hours of webinars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you all have solar training facilities in a lot of your branches? I mentioned 1,000 branches. I would wager it's probably a quarter of your branches that have some form of renewables as a feature. Not all of them. But how do you think about that at the branch level?
Yeah, so some of them do have showrooms that showcase some of the products, but I would say once a quarter, maybe even more frequently, the branches are actually hosting kind of what we call counter days or open house, where we bring in, they're kind of mini trade shows, very similar to Intersolar here,
right.
Where we bring in a group of manufacturers. We invite all the local contractors, whether they're doing business with ABC or not, really just to educate people. It goes back to the AVLs. These contractors are used to using these products. We're bringing in the next generation of products. Here's the options, everybody. Choose what's best for your business.
Yeah, we do a lot of trade days where you can get the contractors to come in, and then you actually set up specifically one vendor and say, hey, listen, bring out a demo and set it up. Or even we can go to their locations, their headquarters, and then we can bring those contractors there to do trainings.
Let's do a quick sort of rapid fire on market signals, kind of the questions that people want to ask you, but don't have the opportunity. Are we heading into oversupply anytime soon?
Not that I know.
No.
Still market constrained?
Definitely.
Yes.
More demand than supply. Tariffs, are they manageable or disruptive?
I think with enough planning, they're definitely manageable. With policy, if it's going to be kind of a shock and awe policy where all of a sudden a tariff is implemented and then, it goes into effect in, 15 days or less, then that's definitely going to be disruptive. But if we can actually wean ourselves into the process, it usually works out for the contractor. But I think you have to talk about sales cycles as well. That 30 to 60 day window for a traditional residential sales cycle. Granted, some people might be shorter than that depending on their market, but on average, 30 to 60 days is usually about the time frame for people to reset with that new pricing and go out and sell again.
Right.
And I think clear communication between manufacturer and distributor to contractor that has to be in place. And if there's, especially what's going on with tariffs, we have to know what's going on with the manufacturers. They have to communicate that to us, and then the associates of ABC reach out to those contractors and communicate to them. So we try to keep like a 60 day to 30 days. But like you said, we could be popped one day in 1 week with some random tariff that we never knew was coming into effect.
You rightly pointed out that this is a construction industry at the end of the day, and it's not construction unless you have humans. Well, and at least this for the next decade, who pick up tools and climb up on the roof and do the work, which means we need a labor force that's not only available, but educated. Mm-hmm. Are we still seeing a labor shortage? Is it improving? Still tight? Where do you stand?
It's definitely a shortage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even on the electrical side, being from North Carolina, I remember once I had my electrical license, about 2 or 3 years later, there was such a shortage of electricians in the state that they actually lowered the standards on how to pass your test by 5% in order for people to be able to pass the test, to be able to hire more electricians out in the field. But, we're competing with a lot of other industries as well for kind of the same workforce.
That's right. And we're seeing a blue collar renaissance, honestly. Like there's in an AI era, there is going to be a flight into the trades where you can prove that you can qualifiably do something well, mm-hmm. and that can't be easily replaced by a robot. One strategic move that you think contractors should make in the next 12 months, but most won't.
Buy smart. Buy smart. Don't store, because you don't want to be stuck with a product. Because what can hurt you financially, it can hurt a distributor, but not as terribly affect the contractor. Yeah. So they got to be very careful what they buy, follow the rules, read up on the government fiat compliancy, the new fiat guidelines, know how you're doing your business, know if you're going to go a finance way, if you're going to do a TPO, if you're going to go a cash way. You kind of have to know the whole picture. Yeah. And just be smart. Don't take huge risks. Communicate and talk before you jump into the deep end of the pool of that.
Yeah.
And I think if you're in the TPO markets, leasing's only around for the next 2 years. What are you going to do after that? So my biggest thing for contractors right now in those TPO markets, learn to sell cash.
Yeah.
Because if you wait until the end, it's too late for them.
You don't think that there'll be another, a smart entrepreneur will create a new hybrid financing product that allows us to continue the grift?
There's always creative accounting, but that's between them and the IRS.
Yeah.
So.
If we fast forward 3 years, do you have a sense of who's still standing and why?
I think the fiat compliance is still going to be here in the next 3 years, and I think it's going to continue on. I think it was the best thing and the best outlook for the solar industry to kind of get the bad apples out of there, the bad characters, and kind of hyper focus on what we have here in America. I think that's still going to be here. So I think those companies that have established that are in America are going to be the long-standing ones.
I think also the regional players, it's not going to be the big national guys anymore. It's definitely going to be the rise of the regional players. You're going to have the super regionals, as you kind of coined that term, that are more, maybe multi-state, maybe 3 to 4 states at the max. They're not going to all 40 different states. I think that would probably be the biggest one.
Yeah. Rob Smith and Eric Cieslak manage the renewables business for ABC Supply on the West Coast and on the East Coast. For the second year in a row, are supporting us here, making the Hub Stage possible. Thank you for doing that. And thank you all for joining us here for a live conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.